Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nathan Shapura, Senior Political Advisor at the European People's Party. On behalf of the EPP, welcome to this episode of EPP Family Talks. We are very pleased to be able to welcome with us this afternoon Ms. Roberta Metsola from our EPP member party in Malta, Partito Nazionalista, and newly elected Vice President of the European Parliament. Welcome. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for the invitation, and hello to everybody who's watching us this afternoon.
I know you're working on so many important issues right now, but the first thing I wanted to ask you, as we've asked many of our guests on this series, is just how are you doing, and maybe also how is the situation in your own home country of Malta right now?
Well, this past few weeks have been, let's say, my introduction to this new role that I was elected to, and it's a very interesting one and one that I'm proud to hold. And I thank my political group, the European People's Party group in the Parliament, to have nominated me from this position. I guess the immediate thing when we talk about my country, Malta and Gozo, is my home and will always be my home, and it's a country that has always overcame geographic limitations to be seated at the very center of the table, and that's something that for me is something I never forget in all my political work. Of course, COVID has hit us hard. It has hit not only us from a health perspective, but of course our tourism is suffering very badly. Our businesses are suffering, and we need to really look at how our economy is going to recover. But this year has not only been dominated by COVID, it has also been dominated by the aftermath of the collapse of Joseph Muscat's government and his ensuing inquiry and the judicial investigation into his actions, and one that has continued to seek justice and truth on behalf of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the family, and our people who really are fighting for justice and truth on the streets every day, to whom I salute.
I know, because I remember from the campaign in 2019 that this last issue in particular you mentioned is something you've been fighting for since this murder took place. And also you mentioned your country of Malta and its sort of unique role, its geographic role on the exterior, let's say, of Europe's borders. And this is another issue you've worked very, very hard on. You've been a leader in the European Parliament on the issue of strengthening Europe's external borders in your committee of the Libe Committee, or the Committee on Home Justice and Home Affairs, Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. What's the status right now of this issue of strengthening Europe's external borders? Where are we? What still needs to be done now?
Of course, besides the discussion on the economic recovery after COVID, which we hope now to be, let's say, sped up because of the rollout of the vaccine, and we've just heard the good news a few minutes ago, you are right in saying that we have not forgotten also within the Civil Liberties Committee, the Justice and Home Affairs Committee, our focus on our citizens' concerns, right? What people have told us, you remember during the election campaign last year, Nathan, but also even afterwards, that a lot of people have told us, don't forget the focus on migration, don't let go of the fact that if we come from a frontline member state, just as Malta is, there should not be a disproportionate, let's say, challenge for them, or their challenges need to be addressed. And we have in the past legislated, put forward laws where we agreed on the increase of 10,000 new border guards at our external borders. And why have we done that? This is a question, Nathan, that a lot of people ask me. Well, we did that because we want to continue to protect the integrity of our Schengen area. In other words, the freedom of movement between one member state and another. You see what we are currently discussing, let's say, in the context of the Brexit negotiations, how that will affect border movement. In the European Union and the rest of the member states, we have worked really hard to ensure that we have free movement between one member state and another. But we can only do that if our external borders are secure. And that is something that we can never forget, and we have to continue. And this is where also the European People's Party has pushed for, in order to have as strong external borders as possible.
You mentioned this Brexit issue, which is, of course, coming down to the wire yet again, day by day, even hour by hour. We hear new updates, new information. We're waiting for the negotiating team to come up with a deal or not. We're waiting, I think, in particular for the UK in many ways. When you look at the situation now with what's happening, whether there's a deal, whether there's not a deal, what would you say to European citizens are really the main political issues that we should keep in mind as far as the EU's relationship with the UK, no matter what happens going forward?
Well, one thing's for sure, nobody can blame the European Union or indeed the European Parliament and its negotiators for not trying too hard. I think a lot of effort, we've just mentioned, as you mentioned, there remain tiny glimmers of hope that we will manage a deal rather than the UK crashing out of the European Union before the end of the year. This is not only in the EU's interest, but it's also in the UK's interest. We are very, very strong on that. And in the European Parliament, we are looking forward to a new era of a good, solid relationship with the United Kingdom, where both partners, both in this negotiation, but also going forward, are equal partners that can move forward from the perspective of trade, but also from the perspective of economic and political relations. A lot of questions still need to be answered, but there is full commitment in the European Parliament that we will work until the very last moment through our negotiators. Here I also salute Michel Barnier and his team for his work in order to try to secure a deal. This is not about foot stamping, but this is not about political brinksmanship. It is about how to emerge, let's say, successfully from a very unfortunate and regrettable, ultimately, situation.
My understanding, even just from the last few minutes from a meeting, is that the head of the Parliament's UK coordination task force, our own EPP Vice President David McAllister, and your chairman of the EPP group, Manfred Weber, have said really the end of the week is kind of the deadline before then the Parliament would have a chance to properly look at it, properly ratify it. So it could indeed be, I suppose, that, and I guess you're very willing, as your other colleagues are, to be working over Christmas even, to look at whatever may be agreed and to ratify it in the days and the hours even before New Year's.
Yeah, it's whatever it takes. That will, of course, not let's say, go back on what the Parliament's red lines are. They are very, let's say, deeply drawn in the sand. They are, let's say, acceptable, and the European Parliament, let's say, enjoys a huge majority on these red lines. And as long as those red lines are accepted, and then we can really do our utmost to make sure that by the end of the year, no matter how long it takes, no matter what or how difficult the procedure and the formalities might be, that we really reach that deal. And of course, there is a need constantly in a negotiation that you show creativity, that you show flexibility, and as long as those fundamental red lines are not breached, then there has never been a doubt in my mind, in my colleagues' mind, that we would not do anything to make sure that we do not have a situation where the UK crashes out of the EU, because that I remain convinced would be a catastrophe for both sides of the negotiating table.
If I could, I might switch gears a little bit and ask you about another initiative which you've recently been a part of, and I think it's also something which you're working on an ongoing basis. Just a few days ago, you were headlining a panel alongside Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, alongside President-elect of Moldova, Maya Sandu, on the topic Women as Leaders of Democratization. And this was an event honoring the legacy of Simone Weil. So I wonder if you would just tell our viewers who might not know, first of all, who she was, Simone Weil, and then what this initiative means for you, and maybe assess where are we in the European Union, where is the European Union as far as inclusion of women in politics?
It is important to continue to organize events such as this, especially a few days after Maya Sandu made history. She is a trailblazer in Moldova. She has inspired a nation and continues to inspire other political leaders, even aspiring politicians in other countries to do exactly what she did, bring a country together, offer hope, offer vision, and offer optimism to a country that has gone through difficult times in the past. This was the message that we joined together with Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, in making sure and sending the message that how important it is to support each other in these missions. And of course, we had to mention Simone Veil throughout the debate, because she herself was, let's say, a post-war giant of European politics. She was a trailblazer in her own right, and she bequeathed, let's say, the baton of politics and women in politics to my generation, as I have an obligation and responsibility to pass it on to future generations. We're still very far away when we see how many women are elected in politics today, when we talk about the debate of how we need more female candidates, how to encourage more women to run for elected office, but also how to make sure, for example, that the public sector ensures that it reaches its goals of making sure that there is as much gender equality at all levels. I like to talk about women across the board and not women on boards, even in terms of discussion what we could do to improve the representation of all genders across all levels. We still have a long way to go. But I really believe that the election of people like Maya Sandu, when you see Commission President Ursula von der Leyen working so hard, delivering every day tangible results to each and every citizen of the European Union, then I think that the future, even at the end of such a difficult year, is very bright, and I'm extremely optimistic.
Maybe let me just follow up with, or on that note of optimism. I heard in this intervention that you had last week at this event, in your video event, I heard you give an anecdote or tell the story of the fact that you were, I think, along with two colleagues, the first 3 female MEPs from your country of Malta to have been elected in a very long time, at least. So what made the difference, do you think, in that election in 2000? I think this was 2014, if I'm not mistaken.
2013, and we had never had women before, not for a long time. We were the first members of the European Parliament to be elected as women in 2013. So we went from 0 to 3 in one day, and that showed also how close we were to have equal representation of women and men in the European Parliament. A year later, Nathan, we went from 3 out of 6 to 4 women out of 6 in the European Parliament. And that also sent a message that Malta can really jump in terms of challenges that had never been overcome before. I'm not saying that all is rosy. On the national level, the number of women in the Maltese Parliament is very, very low. And that's why I am, for my part, pushing for the Maltese Parliament to be full-time, to ensure that more incentives are given for women to enter politics. But yes, it is not a question of people not voting for women. In fact, we have a very direct participatory electoral system, and that has really resulted in more and more women getting elected to the European Parliament. And my job now is to make sure that others succeed me. And if I can do this from my position as Vice President of the Parliament, but also as head of my national delegation in my political group, but also as somebody who would go around from village to village in Malta and Gozo and try to encourage, identify young girls who can come forward and fight for things they believe in, irrespective even of which political party they join, irrespective of which cause they take up. I mentioned earlier the civil society movement after Daphne Caruana Galizia's assassination. And let me once again pay tribute to her fearless courage as a mother of 3 boys herself, as a lone female voice in a sea of intimidation, bullying, and scaremongering. That led to so many other women taking up a civil society organizational cause of truth and justice, and these are the ones who continue to fight every day.
Well, and of course, now there is a gender balanced commission. This is something that the EPP really campaigned for in 2019, and it's a real accomplishment as well for the European Union. I was listening to you there talking about your constituency in Gozo and in Malta and issues you were fighting for. And I just have to say, I remember being there with you on the ground in 2019 and seeing the way you interact with people in the neighborhood in your own constituency. And I can attest to the fact that you are really passionate about these issues, and that people in your constituency know that and know you to be somebody fighting on their behalf as well. I think that was very evident just from a short time being there with you and being in your party headquarters.
We had good memories, Nathan, there. Those were really good events.
Let me finish this interview, as we often do with our guests on these Family Talk series, with a few more personal, more informal questions so that our political family can get to know you a bit better. So the first question I would have for you is there a historical figure that has been particularly inspirational for you as you look back, or as you have struggled, I guess, like all the rest of us, through this difficult year, 2020? Talked about Simone Weil, maybe somebody else that comes to mind when you think in particular about this situation of pandemic.
Rather than a historical figure, I would mention Chancellor Angela Merkel. I think that the way she has led the current presidency of the Council of the European Union, but also that the way she has led not only her country, but fellow leaders, where frankly, many others were not leading as well as she did, but due to the way she approaches the facts, the way she uses her scientific background to spread trust and also show clarity when things can otherwise be so unclear and so, let's say, so disorganized. I think she was really, her leadership qualities truly shone, and she is someone who really inspired me this year.
Some of that I might have missed because of the connection, but let me ask you another question, also on the note of the more personal, more informal, and that is simply, is there a book or a film or a series that you've recently watched or read that you would recommend to our viewers?
Well, I recently watched The Queen's Gambit. I am not a chess player. In terms of the game at home, although my husband and my kids are avid players. But I really enjoyed that series, and I also read over the past months a book called The Education of an Idealist by Samantha Power, who was the Barack Obama's ambassador to the United Nations, and also the choices, the difficult decisions that were made while she was in her position was something that I looked at and could really take on board. And I have recommended this book to be read by so many people, and everybody came back with the same, let's say, idea. We have to spread it around and make sure that more people read it, because it's so real and so close to home.
Press the wrong mute button. So The Queen's Gambit is definitely already in my queue, but that's another great recommendation. Thanks for that. The Education of an Idea, one to look out for. And then a final question. This is a follow-up to your recent tweet, which you called an obligatory Christmas tree tweet. And that is there a particular holiday tradition or dish that you are looking forward to? I know there are a lot of restrictions these days. Nothing is quite the same, but what are you looking forward to for Christmas?
Well, my husband is Finnish. I met him in the EPP family, and we have, let's say, brought up a very European family, Finnish and Maltese. I'm the one who does all the cooking. Usually everybody comes over. This year, sadly, it will be without our parents because of the current restrictions, but I definitely look forward to some downtime with all my boys watching Christmas movies, some better than others, and actually eating quite a lot, as we Mediterraneans like to do. Well, that sounds lovely, and I wish you, your family, a very Merry Christmas on behalf of the EPP. Ms. Roberta Metsola, Vice President of the European Parliament from our member party, Partit Naționalist in Malta. Thanks so much for all the great work you are doing, and we hope to speak with you again soon in a better, hopefully, and healthier and safer 2021. Thank you. To all of our viewers, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of EPP Family Talks. Hope to see you again soon. Stay safe, everyone.